A very good afternoon to you and welcome to Opinion 2017 this Wednesday, 1st of November 2017. And today we are looking at the state of the nation. One day after Raila's Odinga much waited for mega announcement that has elicited mixed reactions. And of course, one day after the national examinations, KCPE began. Of course, we wish all the students who are sitting the KCPE all the best in their exams. And today I'm joined in studio by distinguished gentlemen. I'm really humbled to have the presence, to be honored by the presence of Suba Churchill, who's the president of the Civil Society Reference Group and the coordinator of the Civil Society Congress. It's important to know that Suba Churchill was delegate number 463 in the Bomas process that realized the new constitution. He was the chair of the Technical Committee on Citizenry and Bill of Rights. And I must say you did a good job because we have a very robust Bill of Rights. Karibu sana, Suba Churchill.
Thank you very much.
And of course we do have Felix, who's a lawyer, political analyst, and activist. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. Suba, before we get to the gist of the state of the nation, going back to the Bomas draft.
Yes.
I mean, it was a very tedious and long process that cost many lives along the way. Given where we are today, is this what the Constitution envisaged?
Not really. I think the one fundamental difference between the Constitution that we adopted in 2010 and the Bomas draft is the configuration of the state. Because the executive arm of the state was dispersed between two offices, the presidency and the office of the prime minister. And that ensured that power was not concentrated in one hand. And it ensured that executive authority was tempered in a way that it would not cause the harm that it is causing today. The presidency was less attractive, if you wish, because some of the powers that are currently being handled by the presidency was distributed to the various arms of government. And we had proposed that in order to have a representative assembly that is accountable to the people, we needed an aspect of the executive periodically attending the National Assembly to be held to account on the performance of the executive. That is a very fundamental departure between the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and what we had at the Bomas draft. And so that is a very critical, and what the crisis we have today actually stems from the dilution of the Bomas draft by a team of members of parliament that met in Naivasha under the leadership of Abdikadir Mohammed, who has since been gallanded for striking a truce between the differing political opinions on the executive. And so that is it. The second thing is that the devolved units in the Bomas draft were more than the 47 that we have. In fact, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 reduced them by half. We had, in fact, at the Bomas draft, 74 devolved units. We had 3 levels of devolution. We had the national government. We had the counties, which were 74. No, but before we went to the counties, which were 74, we had the regional level. And we believed that in order to cushion the county levels of government, from the national level, the pool by the national executive, you needed some buffer zone, and that buffer zone was provided by the regional level. And then, of course, we had the village. The village, because we believed, and I still think it is the right thing to do, that the village is where most people live. That even when you take county governments to the county levels, they are still a bit detached from ordinary folks. And if devolution is meant to enable people exercise sovereign power, of the state, then they need to do that at the lowest level possible, where a majority of the peasantry live.
Felix, just still on the same, how the executive operates now and how parliament operates now, even if you look at, even if you move away from the Bomas draft and use the 2010 constitution, the independence of Bunge, the independence of commissions like IBC, is it where we really envisaged? Is it what we thought ought to be?
Absolutely not. And while the architecture envisaged with the Bomas draft was definitely, in my opinion, the right way for the nation to take, the 2010 draft still has its own graces, and one of such was to sort of give both operational and legal autonomy to Parliament, yes, to independent commissions and a few other independent offices. However, remember, the law can define the way an institution is supposed to operate.
Yes.
But it is the actions of the people and the occupants of those offices that eventually tell us whether we are doing what the law says or whether we are according
with
the
occupants of this current parliament live up to that expectation.
Absolutely. The parliament is just but an appendage of the executive by every measure. We have seen a proclamation by the president or the deputy president becoming law within the next 10 days in parliament. We have seen independent offices carrying out instructions both from the executive or from pedestrian politicians, as it were. So we have a structure that if you had people of substance who can stand up for independence, we could achieve some relative sense of independence, but definitely it's not where we are right now.
All right. Marion Sijali, you are saying, I'm not sure if Sijali is your name, or it is that Haujali. Anyway, Marion Sijali, kama baba, anawacha Uhuru akuwe president, I will never vote again in the rest of my life. Alfred Lusweti, NRM. Patrick Mutudho, Tibim. Kerry Johnson, Resist. Agwings Volent, NRM. Now, let's get into the gist of this. Yesterday's announcement by the NASA coalition leader. Mixed reactions. I mean, I've received several calls. And I'm wondering, what were people expecting? Is it a sort of an anti-climax? Because I thought Raila Odinga was very specific, and we'll discuss what he said. He said he believes Uhuru's win is not legitimate, so therefore he's not going to recognize him as the president. He issued some measures, including economic boycott, People's Assembly. But there's certain quarters that feel that something was not announced. In your opinion, Suba?
Yes.
What is it that people were expecting?
I've met people since the announcement by the NASA leader. I've met people who feel somehow disappointed that it was not the kind of earth-shaking announcement they expected. I've talked to people who say, we thought, he was going to say that he's going to be sworn in on this and that date as President of the Republic of Kenya on account of his stolen victory on August 8th.
Yes.
So there are those feelings there. They also thought that the resistance would start immediately.
Yes.
That it needed not to be just an announcement. They expected, a rally at Uhuru Park when, the actual civil resistance would begin. And because people are just fresh from, these encounters in Kawangware, these encounters in Mathare, these encounters across the town and the rest of the country, people felt that, it kind of, ebbed out in a manner that left them kwa mata. So to speak. So there is that feeling out there.
Yes.
But those of us who know that struggles of the kind that NASA has launched require a lot of planning, require a bit of preparations, require a bit of training, because people, the comments I see in the newspapers, on television, people, even those you thought would know better, are completely ignorant about civil resistance and its tactics and strategies. And I think one of the things I'm going to dedicate my time to do in the next couple of weeks is to pen a number of opinion pieces just to let people understand what civil resistance is about. Because there is a divergent opinion there, from the very bizarre to the most ignorant. I've seen, Aden Duale, the leader of majority in the National Assembly, equating it to guerrilla tactics.
Yeah, the deputy president has mentioned militia.
He has mentioned militia. But you would understand, because these are people who have never been engaged in any struggle for change. So when people who have been comfortable and watching at positions from the comfort of their of their balconies and prying on those positions and zeroing in and actually successfully running away with those positions, you would really understand why they are so uncomfortable and frightened by the mere announcement. But anyone who has studied the Mau Mau War will tell you that those tactics that the Mau Mau used, and I thought, the first people who should embrace civil resistance are people from Central. Luckily and unfortunately for them, because most of them are a younger generation that never participated, they think, when it is waged by others, it is evil. When it was waged by people in Central Kenya, it was the right thing to do. For me, the circumstances are not different, and therefore I think looking at the trend and the pattern our politics has taken, the state of our nation, I think those are some of the tactics that can best counter and redeem this country from dipping into anarchy.
Wow. Davis Nickers, we need to do something urgently. Are people following through the narrative of wakitangaza, wakihesabu?
Tunahesabu, correct.
Wakitangaza, tunatangaza, wakihapisha. Felix, what people really expecting, or shall we go to State House and evict?
So just to pick up from what Senior has stated, I equally have been at pains to try and explain to people that in all measures, by design and strategy and all that, the pronouncements by the Right Honorable yesterday met my own expectations. And the reasons I'm saying this is because, one, Raila Odinga fought for the constitution that we have today. And that constitution is the system under which we can operate. And so everything that has to be undertaken, all the measures that we have to undertake have to be in accordance with that constitution.
We must always observe constitutionalism at the end of the day.
What the opponents, and what I feel here is that some of our supporters are starting to take the narrative of the opponents. What the opponents wanted yesterday is for Raila to make a pronouncement that falls outside the ambit of the constitution, so that it then justifies their cries that you have seen on international media about formation of militia, about guerrilla, which is neither here nor there. So when he narrowed down and accorded, the strategies with the right of assembly, with freedom of expression, with everything, which is provided for in the constitution, of course it takes away what I would call the demonization of the person Raila Odinga. And then to further amplify what Senior Churchill has said, you see, organize, and I want for a moment, Baggy, to talk to fellow NRM colonels and
that's your camera.
and people do not need to preoccupy themselves so much with the person Uhuru Kenyatta. He is neither here nor there in the struggle that we are starting to launch. Uhuru Kenyatta as a person has zero philosophy or zero achievement that will live beyond his last day in State House. The struggle that we are embarking on is about electoral justice. It's about ensuring that every child born in every corner of this country has an equal opportunity to ascend to any office fairly and according to the Constitution. So hold on a second and understand that this is going to be a long journey, but it is a journey that will be successful nonetheless. And you know, the measures have been outlined. The election is not recognized, as it were. There are issues of civil resistance, measures of civil resistance that have been clearly outlined. So let us not tire, let us not fall into the trap of the enemy so that we rush into something which we will not be able to sustain.
Okay, there's a very interesting comment here. Kenyans have a sense of humor. This is for comic relief. Kennedy Arita Musungu. Don't worry about Duale. He was elected with votes that are equal to a school head girl. Musungu, you did not just say that.
I feel like Musungu has been unfair to the head girl.
Really? Mwelu, you're saying, just wondering, who is going to be sworn in? Musa Chekai, you're saying Bunge la Mwananchi Assembly is ready to take over political discussions at a higher level. Chekai is a speaker of the... I know
Chekai is a friend, is a colleague.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's just get into the finer details of Raila's statement yesterday.
Yeah.
Economic boycott.
Yes.
What does it mean? What does economic boycott mean? We don't pay tax. We don't consume certain products. What does it mean? I know at some point in the civil rights movement in the U.S., Dr. Martin Luther King did allude to that. I remember in his speech called The Mountaintop, yes, where he was urging black people that we will not consume Coca-Cola. If these people don't think we are equal to them, they will not put money in their banks. But can that work in this context, Suba?
It does. You see, civil resistance, or what people have come to know as civil disobedience, constitute acts of omission and commission. That you can do certain things or fail to do certain things, right, that are expected of any normal, in any normal situation. Mm-hmm. And you remember one of the backbones of our struggle for independence from British colonial occupation was no taxation without representation. And mm-hmm, if the statement already made yesterday is that we are not going to recognize, we are not about and will never recognize President Uhuru's government, then it means mm-hmm, some of the things that mm-hmm, anyone would do as a responsible citizen in obedience to the law and practice as laid out, yes, will not happen. Mm-hmm. And you don't need to look any further. Civil resistance has started. On the 26th, mm-hmm, it was expected across the world and in this country that all registered voters, 19 million plus, would troop to polling stations and cast their vote. If not in favor of Uhuru, then the other candidates, because the former prime ministers had since left the race. Yes. That did not happen. What did we have? Less than 4 million votes if the true picture were to be displayed. Mm-hmm. Of course, Chebukati announced over 7 million. He's right, yet to persuade us how those 7 million came about. Yes. Because by 4 p.m., less than 4 million voters had cast their ballot. And in a normal trajectory, you'd expect that the 1 hour left between 5 and 6 when the polling closed, it was not possible to have the 3 million plus voters that he claims, troop to the polls. So the fact that people refused and resisted any attempt to vote, the fact that 4 counties in Nyanza area never voted and have since been left out of the voting process, at least for purposes of 2017 elections, is civil resistance. So those are the kind of acts that we are talking about. Secondly, when we talk about economic boycott, you are saying if there is a certain company that is perceived and it has been investigated and established mm-hmm, to be supportive of certain policies or government programs that you don't like, you call on people that on this particular day will not use our Safaricom line, for example. As an example. Okay. I'm not saying that is what will happen, okay, but as an example.
It's important to clarify.
As an example, okay, you can imagine the amount of loss that that company will incur If, for example, on a particular day, you say, don't fuel your car in this or that particular station,
Right.
you can imagine how much loss that company will incur. If, for example, you tell people that today we are not watching this or that television station, you can imagine how much loss that company, that media house will incur, considering that what sustains media houses is advertisement. So when advertisers know that their programs stand no chance at all of being viewed on a particular day, they'll pull out because they do not see any sense in investing in a process that is not attracting customers that are commensurate with the amount of investment they are putting. So those are the kind of economic sabotage activities that civil resistance envisages.
Wow. Teresia Nyanjui watching from Switzerland. We need peace. According to her, Kefa Wanywa following. Bukri Mrefu, we need reforms in IBC. We'll get to that. Where do you draw the line, Felix, between boycott and economic sabotage? I mean, some quarters are actually saying that given this extended electioneering period, we're already having issues with the economy. Is it fair or on NASA to say that because of the sudden actions that have been taken by NASA leadership to stand up for what they believe is right, then now the economic meltdown should be blamed on them? And if that is the case, what of when the economic boycott begins?
That is a totally misplaced argument, and let me give you certain examples. Within this region,
Yes.
there are a number of countries that are registering higher economic growth percentages than Kenya. One such is Ethiopia. As Ethiopia registers about 7.2 economic growth last year, almost the whole year there have been demonstrations in Addis Ababa, where the Oromia region did not agree with certain policies of government about the Addis metropolis.
Yes.
And so they have been consistently demonstrating. But the economy has grown. We have countries that are in way much strife like Sudan, all right? Not Southern Sudan, but Northern Sudan.
Yeah, there's Sudan, yeah.
Yet, Sudan has 20% unemployment and Kenya has 40% unemployment. So this economy is already in shambles as we speak. Nobody should say that the electioneering period has taken away a certain, this amount of the GDP or what have you. But even if it were so, okay, how do you appropriate to NASA omissions and commissions by the IEBC? Because we wouldn't be here if a fair, credible, and transparent election was carried out on August 8th in the first place.
Yes.
And then the second question that we need to ask people is, what is the price of justice? What is the price of what is true and what is just? Because if we gloss over this today, we will be right here again 5 years. The economy will take that slump again. Now, where do you draw the line? An economic boycott is not necessarily an economic sabotage. What we are saying is Company A either supports the government or is associated with certain government personalities. So what you do is deny it income. In the alternative, use goods from Company B, which is still a Kenyan company. We are not telling people stop producing. We are not telling people stop spending money or what have you. What we are saying is cut off the revenue that supports this illegitimate government until when they can understand that people actually believe in what is just and fair. So economic acts of economic boycotting certain products, reassigning your resources to a certain institution and not the other, does not constitute economic sabotage whatsoever.
Well, I hear you. Kabuna favored Edna. A state of negative peace never lasts long. Justice must be done or seem to be done. Jotham DMC Okelo, you're saying there are only two sins under the sun. Sin of omission or commission. Civil disobedience shall apply where necessary. Now, there was also something mentioned about People's Assembly, where elected leaders, non-elected leaders, other actors, NGOs and stakeholders. I mean, from an NGO's perspective, will this be a welcome move? And what does this say then about the elected leaders? Because sovereign power is credited to elected leaders. Does it mean that when we are NASA is constituting the People's Assembly, then it's a no confidence vote on the National Assembly and the other assemblies as constituted?
You see, one needs to first of all appreciate the theory of civil resistance. That civil resistance also involves extra-institutional mechanisms. And so once you say that you don't recognize the government, the national government, it means that you don't recognize those governments at all levels in certain circumstances. And therefore, what the NASA is seeking to invoke is the provision on Article 1 of the Constitution that vests the sovereign power of the Republic in the hands of citizens. Right. And that article goes on to say that the people shall exercise their power either directly or indirectly through their democratically elected leaders. To whom are people supposed to delegate those power? They're supposed to delegate their sovereign power to the executive arm of government, right, as symbolized by the presidency, yes, to the legislature through members of parliament and the Senate, yes, and members of the county assemblies. Right. Now, if people resort to civil resistance tactics, then it means that they are taking back the power that they're supposed to have ceded to those elected leaders, because in this particular circumstance, remember the Constitution says democratically elected leaders. Right. Now, what we have are imposters masquerading as leaders, but who have not acquired those positions of leadership through democratic means and processes. And therefore, what NASA is saying is that the people, in exercise of their sovereign power, right, as recognized in the Constitution and inherent in them by virtue of being citizens of the Republic, will be convening in their constituent assemblies at those levels of government to deliberate and put into practice some of the decisions that they'll be carrying out in exercise of their sovereign power. So, as civil society, we are also saying we as citizens come together through our citizen formations and continue to exercise, even if we are the democratically elected government, we still have our residual power that we want to exercise by participating in the management of public affairs insofar as they affect our day-to-day lives. And therefore, for us as a sector, right, we are also saying that we too have a grievance against this regime. Since 2013, right, we have had a regime that has been hell-bent on cannibalizing the civil society sector, that does not believe in people's participation in policy formulation and implementation. And we are saying that the Public Benefit Organizations Act, a law that was passed and assented to by retired President Mwai Kibaki on 14th of January 2013, has not been implemented to date. Reason, the current regime thinks and still argues that the civil society is part of those forces that took them to The Hague. Remember in the 2013 elections, when it was convenient, they accused the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga of taking them to The Hague. Right. As soon as they were done with the elections, and it was no longer convenient to accuse the former Prime Minister, the civil society became the punching bag that this regime has always used to learn its armchair, tactics and used as a punching bag. So we are saying that we have had enough of this, and we are saying that for us as civil society, those assemblies that will be established under the civil resistance movement will provide an opportunity for us also to reclaim our freedoms of association, assembly, and expression.
Well, I'll get back to you on the NGO, because it's a very robust subject. I mean, we've seen some very unfortunate scenes. I mean, you wake up in the morning and you have flying squad officers all over your place. And the most disturbing thing with fake court orders, I don't know how a police officer can come with a fake court order and still get away with it. But we'll get back to that. Emmanuel Mushira, you're saying, let's secede. Well, I don't know. I don't think we are there yet. Sylvia Chege, Militias, your aim is to ban Kenya. You will not succeed in Jesus' name. This is Sylvia. Check. I mean, there's this tendency to invoke the name of God here and there.
In vain, I mean.
Yeah, but I believe that God's hand is very much in what is happening.
I mean, if the reference of militia is are protesters whose only tool was perhaps a stone, then King David was a militia.
Oh,
is Sylvia saying that King David, who defeated Goliath using a sling, because a sling also uses a stone, as a Christian, does she think that King David was a militia?
Well, that is the gospel according to Suba. I want to engage you on, look, if you're saying that then the people are recalling their sovereign power, you have the National Assembly constituted as it is, and you have the People's Assembly constituted here. Are we not having parallel governments?
Whether we are having parallel governments or not, it's not really a question. What we need to focus ourselves on is, are they recognized under the Constitution? And just before I come to responding to your real question, when Mr. Kenyatta went to take his Term 2 certificate from Chebukati.
Well, there have been many. I don't know. Term what?
Term 2. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know, an academic year has Term 1, Term 2, Term 3. Yeah. The Term 1 one was declared invalid. He has Term 2. We are looking forward to the final exam. Right. Something very interesting happened, and let me try to illustrate that. Among the many things he said, he also said that he did not assent to the bill, the electoral changes, the elections law amendment bill that was hurriedly passed through the National Assembly and taken to him. Now, when he said that, people clapped. And that hall, most of those people were members of parliament,
right,
who passed that law.
And they are happy that he did
and they are happy that he is saying he did not assent to it. Now, from that small act, okay, you have a National Assembly where an illegitimacy has condensed into majority. Mm-hmm. What option is there? Because the tools available to NASA in the National Assembly are debate, is a vote, and you cannot use those tools to speak sense. They are happy to pass sense, then clap against their own idiocy a week later. So what do you do in such a situation? You have to convene another assembly that is absolutely within the ambits of the law. And, you know, when we started writing our constitution, we said the people can exercise their authority in person or delegate it to elected officials. First, we don't even know whether a majority of members of parliament are elected. You know, it is an issue of debate that is out there.
Yeah, there are very many cases.
There are very many cases, and at the end of it, that majority might have been eroded. So these assembly, and remember, one thing that the statement suggests is that some of these measures will be ratified by county assemblies. Okay? So in essence, this assembly is totally embedded within the law. It is just as a place of debate, a place of discourse, a place of discussion, just as parliament.
But if I may ask, just as a layman.
Yes.
The People's Assembly decides A, and the National Assembly decides B. As a citizen, what do I follow?
The people are supreme.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but those are the questions everybody
yes.
is asking.
You see, one would argue that the National Assembly is elected.
Right.
If you look at the vote, the turnout on the repeat presidential election,
yes,
of MPs that were elected in areas that people did not turn up to vote. You see, the role of the National Assembly and that of the Senate are threefold. 1, representation. 2, lawmaking. 3, oversight. Can members of the National Assembly and the Senate, from areas where people did not turn out to vote, still purport to represent the people who defied the expectation to turn out and vote on the 26th? So basically what we are saying is that in areas where people heeded the NASA call,
yes,
and did not turn out to vote, or resisted attempts to impose a voting process on them, those representatives have, by and large, been recalled. If people are waiting for the formality of, filling forms, collecting signatures, for me, there is no number that would be larger than the voting by the foot that people did on October the 26th. So those people, when it is like a neighbor coming to borrow salt,
yes,
you are in the process of cooking, and your salt is not enough, or your maize flour is not enough. The person you are going to borrow does not give you more. He gives you less than what he has. So when we delegate power, so our sovereign power, we only delegate a little to our representative, and that's why we can recall them. And for me, by setting up these people's assemblies, the NASA brigade is saying that because the constitutional mechanism has let us down, we are setting up extra institutional mechanisms that will enable us further our course.
Okay, as we wrap up, what next for IBC? I hear Chebukati wants to open the servers for this particular election that happened on the 26th, the one that was boycotted. How about the servers that served us on the 8th of August? As you respond to that, as you wrap up in terms of way forward.
So it's very funny. I've seen the Daily Nation banding around some figures saying they've come from Otimofo,
right,
that 7.5 million Kenyans voted as at the close of 30th October. So I think there has been considerable voting going on from 26th till 30th before we reached 7.5 million. IBC is an institution that has unfortunately cannibalized itself. The commissioners who essentially should be shepherds of independence have become vessels of peddling personal and political interests, captive to the Jubilee wing. If you saw how that commission operated at Bomas, where even the chairperson did not meet his own commissioners, where as 4 commissioners would meet certain observers, and then after that meeting, those observers go to meet the chairperson. That is not a commission that you can call independent. It's not a commission that can midwife the exercise of the sovereign will of the people. So between now and the next elections, which, as the Right Honourable has said, should be within 90 days, the entire commission has to go. The 9 commissioners just have to go. They do not meet, they have not demonstrated competence, they have not demonstrated, some of them are not even qualified. We have issues with people having fake degrees and they're holding commission positions. So the commission needs to be disbanded. The secretariat needs a radical surgery, so that, these people can go and carry out nominations for Jubilee, because they are, I think, you saw even the chairman coming to announce results with a Jubilee jersey, I think.
Oh, really? I thought it was just a red.
Someone juxtaposed 2 photos of him and Murkomen. We don't know whether there was a sleepover or something.
Well, I wouldn't know.
We didn't know. But what essentially we are saying is the commission needs to go. The secretariat needs a radical surgery, and the electoral regime laws, these amended ones that have been passed, needs to be challenged and quashed, and then we need to reorganize ourselves and have a credible election where, which has the 2 limbs of democracy. As I finish, Democracy has two limbs.
Right.
The first one is the majority will, where we say you have been elected by the majority.
Yes.
The second limb is the acquiescence of the minority.
Say that again. The what of the minority?
The agreement by the minority
Yes.
that through a free and fair process,
Yes.
we lost an election.
Right.
That maybe we were not able to organize adequately or something, but we lost an election.
Yes.
What we have today in Kenya is not democracy, because one limb does not exist totally. What we have is a charade, and that has to be remedied by an election where every Kenyan in all of our 47 counties have an opportunity to vote and come out and elect a leader of their choice.
Robin Natukunda, if Uhuru refuses a unity government, justice should come through an Egypt-Tunisia way. 3.5 million country in over 45 million. Canon Karanja yesterday, Suba Churchill did indicate that Uhuru should form a government with the positions of prime minister and deputies. And as you wind up, is this something worth considering, and the way forward for the resistance movement? Should Kenyans be afraid, or is it likely to succeed?
One, the proposal by the National Council of Churches of Kenya is only welcome to the extent that that government is a caretaker government lasting for about a year, planning and building institutions, including a new IBC, that will then preside over a free, fair, and credible elections in accordance with the Constitution. To that extent, I'll buy into that idea. But if it is to be used as a temporary gap measure that we have always done every time we are back, yes, the Mukatenusu affair, it has never contributed to addressing the many, many governance issues that we have had over the years. You remember, we had the same thing after the post-election violence in 2007, 2008, when we set up institutions, we had power sharing. After that, the real underlying issues and causes of that conflict were not sufficiently addressed. To date, the current government is thoroughly scared of looking at the side view mirror. Reason? Because they see themselves. Anytime they look at the side view mirror, they get haunted by their own images because they are part of that past. So what I would say moving forward, and we have told the IBC as much, as soon as the elections were nullified by the Supreme Court, we had the opportunity to meet the IBC as Kura Yangu Sauti Yangu and told them that the only reason we are retaining them to preside over the repeat polls is because the presidency as currently constituted was powerless and incapable of helping the country to reconstitute another commission. That was one. So we must thank the Chebukati for the work that he has done, but he must now begin packing so that he can go home. Because never again can such an incompetent and inept commission be allowed to preside over any election. And you know, this commission, the Chebukati Commission, will go down in the annals of history as the commission that has failed completely to deliver on any of its mandates. You remember? Yes, you see, Kivuitu, even before he bungled the 2007 elections, Kivuitu had delivered the 2002 elections. So it had something going for it. Kivuitu had delivered. The Isaac Hassan Commission, then Kivuitu again delivered on the 2005 referendum. Those first two were achievements by the CKRC under the leadership of Kivuitu. Come back to the Isaac Hassan-led commission, the 2010 referendum, they did very well. They did a number of by-elections quite successfully. And so those two commissions had some success going for it before they got enmeshed in the corruption that entangled them until they were removed. There is nothing positive you can say about Chebukati and his Chiloba. There's nothing you can talk about. They have been there barely a year, and there's nothing to write home about. They have completely failed and must be seen off into oblivion because history has no place for them in our contemporary Kenya.
Right.
Then moving forward, I think as civil society, we have taken the view that free, fair, and credible elections may not even be possible within the 90 days. We agree within 90 days because of the far-reaching and fundamental reforms that need to be carried out to ensure that the electoral commission that will be established in the course of time as we await for free and fair elections requires a total overhaul, not just of the commission, but even the secretariat. Remember, when we pushed for the disbandment of the entire commission, people who cried go slow told us, no, leave the staff alone because the staff is the institutional memory of that institution. Now we know, upon reflection, that that institutional memory does not serve our interests as a country.
Right.
It serves the interests of Jubilee, and they are happy that, you know, they have been able to protect Chiloba from prosecution and arrest. What we are now saying is that we need to totally remove the entire commission and some of its senior staff. Perhaps the only few people that we might want to leave in that places are people performing messengerial duties. Those ones may not have a say on what happens during an electoral process. But if you ask me, and as civil society, we are of the view that a caretaker government is needed, not of the type being proposed by NCCK, but a government that is negotiated by all parties. Because as things stand now, and after the 7 days after the declaration by Chebukati, there might be no legally constituted and legitimately recognized government in the Republic of Kenya.
Wow. I mean, the more we get into this, the more it looks like you're not getting out anytime soon. And it's really unfortunate that we've spent quite a bit of money as a country. And like you say, Chebukati, without apologies, especially for Chiloba, has gotten us here and behaves as if he's the best thing that has happened to this country. Two last comments I'll read from Alphonse Korir, watching from Lungalunga Square. Thank you. Watching from Birmingham, Gina G, Asante. And Abdulrahman Awad. Mashamba imeibiwa ikaisha toka mkoloni aondoke. Sasa imebaki kura. Hakuna tena chenye kuiba. Well, food for thought. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Suba. Churchill, thank you for watching. Thank you for your very valid feedback. Let's do this again tomorrow. Remember, be your brother's keeper. Thank you and goodbye. Wow.